The air inside Studio G was colder than it needed to be. Not a chill of malfunction or oversight, but deliberate, the kind of engineered discomfort meant to sharpen awareness, to remind everyone present that comfort was not the point. The black acoustic panels on the ceiling swallowed noise as efficiently as the room swallowed nerves. 60 seats, curved in perfect geometry, faced a stage with no podium, no backdrop. Just 2 chairs and a table as fragile and pristine as the truth they were all supposedly here to explore. Caroline Leavitt stepped out first. She moved like punctuation, sharp, declarative, rehearsed. The heels of her shoes clicked crisply on the platform, each step measured, each breath pre-timed. Her navy blazer hugged her with authority. Her hair was pulled back so neatly it looked sculpted. No flyaways, no softness. The lights caught the contours of her cheekbones as she smiled the way one does at a camera, not a person. There was no applause. Not yet, but the murmur in the room said enough. Recognition, anticipation, curiosity spiked with skepticism. She sat with precision, spine straight, ankles crossed, hands calmly clasped in her lap. Her eyes scanned the room like a general surveying terrain, not with fear, but with strategy. Then she waited, as if she knew, this part, this calm before the second arrival, was also hers to command. Jasmine Crockett entered without preamble. No announcement, no cue, just her quiet, steady footsteps making their way down the short corridor of expectation. She wore black, not the kind of black you wear to a gala or a protest, but the kind that speaks softly of presence. Her clothes weren't tailored, they weren't styled. They were lived in, and yet, they demanded notice, not by their design, but by their purpose. No jewelry, no lipstick, no pretense. Jasmine's hair was pulled back in a low knot, exposing the calm intensity of her face. As she walked, her eyes didn't scan. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply moved forward with a grace that didn't ask for permission. She sat down across from Caroline with the slow, deliberate ease of someone who knew this wasn't just a debate. It was a moment. The host, right in March, spoke only when both women had taken their seats. "Let's begin simply," he said. His voice, calm and practiced, held the weight of countless televised conversations. In one sentence, what is intelligence? Caroline didn't blink. Intelligence, she said, is the ability to communicate with clarity, especially when emotion tempts you to do the opposite. There was a ripple through the audience. Agreement, perhaps, or at least admiration for the polish. Caroline tilted her chin slightly, absorbing the moment. Ryden turned to Jasmine. "And you?" Jasmine looked at him, not hurried, not hesitant. "Intelligence," she said, "is the bridge built by those who were never invited inside so others wouldn't have to knock." A beat passed, a second longer than expected. Not confusion, no, the meaning was clear. But something in the phrasing made the room still. Caroline didn't nod. She smiled, tight, small, as if to suggest validation. As if to imply agreement where none had been requested. Then, casually, she struck. "You went to law school?" Caroline asked, her voice tilted with faux curiosity. "Because, honestly, you sound more like TikTok than the bar exam." It didn't hit like a joke. It hit like a brick dropped in water. Ripples, a few chuckles, too loud, too quick. Someone let out a drawn-out, "ooh," like it was a schoolyard diss. Caroline smiled wider, savoring it. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded, her gaze unchanged. She exhaled once through her nose. Not in amusement, not in annoyance, just to make space. Behind camera 3, an operator instinctively zoomed. Not on Jasmine, not on Caroline, but to the farthest row, right side of the arc. There sat a young black woman. No badge, no credentials, just presence. She was still, not reacting, not laughing, not shifting, just watching Jasmine. She sat with a beige pouch in her lap. Her blouse white, too big in the shoulders. Her posture straight, her hand resting on that pouch like it carried something precious. The camera paused there. No command, Just instinct. In the control booth, Ryden leaned forward. Camera 3, hold that. The words came out softly, almost under breath. On stage, the debate pressed on. Caroline smiled again, wider this time, as if waiting for a reaction she wasn't going to get. But Jasmine's silence wasn't absence. It was presence. And somewhere in the back of the room, someone else had just started listening for the first time. There was a beat of stillness after the insult, the kind of suspended breath that rooms hold before a shift. Ryden marched tilted forward slightly in his chair, a subtle cue, an attempt to recenter. Let's talk about structure, he said, voice smooth. Modern activism has evolved. Caroline, how do you view structure in today's movements? Caroline pivoted effortlessly, her tone turning syrupy sincere. Structure, she said, is what separates chaos from leadership. It's what makes passion policy. Her voice flowed like a practiced stream, the kind meant to comfort and command at once. Without structure, activism becomes theater. And we've seen too much theater. A few nods, a chuckle from the third row. Jasmine didn't move. Congresswoman Crockett, Ryden turned. Do you agree? Is emotion at odds with structure? Jasmine's voice was soft but clear. Structure is only respected when spoken in a voice people are used to hearing. A murmur passed through the room, not loud, but like a collective shift of weight. Camera 3 didn't move. The girl in the white blouse remained still, eyes locked on Jasmine. Her hand now rested fully on the pouch. The fingers on her right hand had curled just slightly. Not a fist, a readiness. Caroline's smile didn't waver. Spoken like a poet, she said, light and sharp, eyes glancing toward the crowd for affirmation. She didn't get it, not this time, and for the first time, she noticed. A pause flickered in her performance. From the back row, the girl's fingers slid under the flap of the pouch. Not fast, not dramatic. Just deliberate. Ryden turned to Jasmine again. You've spoken about education. How do you approach it in your community work? Jasmine opened her mouth. We focus on listening. Caroline interrupted. Define critical thinking, then. As you use it, it was a trap. Smooth, polished, weaponized curiosity. Jasmine didn't blink. Critical thinking is the ability to challenge even the beliefs you hold most dear. And then she added, but in my classrooms, the thing that keeps students from speaking isn't definition. It's the sound their stomachs make at 11:30 a.m. It's the shame of not having the textbook. It's walking into a space that measures intelligence by tone instead of truth. Silence again, but this time, the quiet pressed inward. The girl in the white blouse reached fully into her pouch. A folded paper emerged, worn, soft-edged. Her fingers held it with care, like something sacred. She didn't open it, not yet, but Jasmine's eyes, without moving from Ryden, flickered, as if she knew. As if the air itself had changed temperature. Ryden asked another question. Caroline answered with polish, but no one was watching her anymore. Not really. The camera operator kept the frame steady. The letter remained unopened in the girl's hand. But somehow, everyone in the room had already started reading it. The shift didn't come in words. It came in breath. The kind of inhale that lingers just a moment too long, as if the body is waiting for something it can't name but knows is near. Jasmine hadn't said a word since the insult. She didn't need to. Her stillness was louder than the punchline, heavier than the laughter that followed. And it was that silence, quiet but full, that began to bend the air inside Studio G. Ryden turned the conversation forward. He was practiced at this, redirecting tension without appearing to erase it. Congresswoman Crockett, he said, you've spoken publicly about educational equity. Could you share how you define equity in practice? Jasmine's eyes shifted to him. Her voice, when it came, didn't rise. It didn't respond to what had come before. It answered the question. Equity, she said slowly, is when access doesn't require assimilation. When people can walk through the door without having to leave their voice on the porch. There it was again, that stillness, not emptiness, fullness. Caroline didn't interrupt. She smiled again, almost reflexively, like someone in a courtroom who knows the jury's watching. But it was a brittle smile now, less certain, more rehearsed. From the far back, the girl in the white blouse didn't move. Her hands still rested on the pouch, but her fingers had tensed, imperceptibly, as if the thread that had begun to stretch between her and the woman on stage had just pulled a little tighter. Ryden turned next to Caroline. "Do you believe equity requires transformation of existing systems?" Caroline was ready. "I believe systems work when people within them are held to consistent standards," she said smoothly. "Transformation is only valuable when it leads to function, not chaos." The crowd nodded. Some of them, others sat still. Jasmine didn't shift. Her face didn't register disapproval or surprise. Only something quieter, older, like she'd heard this line 100 times before, each time from someone who thought it was original. Caroline turned slightly toward the audience again, letting her voice carry. "We can't build systems based on how we feel. Feelings are fleeting, principles endure." She was good, polished, her words clipped, articulated like thesis statements. But still, the girl in the white blouse didn't look at her. Her gaze was locked on Jasmine, unwavering. And Jasmine, for the first time, turned her eyes, not toward Caroline, but toward the audience. She didn't speak, she simply looked, and in that glance, she found the girl. The connection was wordless, but unmistakable. Ryden moved on. "We've heard a lot about structure today," he said. "Congresswoman, do you believe emotion and structure are mutually exclusive?" Jasmine turned back to him, and then, briefly, to Caroline. "I believe structure," she said, "should never be used to silence the experience it was built upon." A murmur, a breath, a shift in the way the light seemed to fall. Caroline folded her hands. She was recalibrating, trying to find her next edge. But she was losing altitude, not from lack of clarity, but from something more subtle. The room no longer moved at her rhythm. It had slowed, deepened, begun to pulse at Jasmine's pace. And at the edge of that current sat a girl with a folded letter in her lap. The pouch had shifted slightly now, the corner of the paper peeking from beneath the flap. Still she didn't speak, still she didn't move. But when Jasmine next answered, her voice found a note that hadn't been struck before. "I've been told my whole life," she said, "that I'm articulate, for someone like me. That I'm calm, until I'm not. That I'm angry, when I'm accurate." She looked at Caroline. "But I've never been told I'm loud, when I'm silent. Silence. Absolute. No coughs. No whispers. Just breath, held. Because everyone in that room knew something had shifted again. Not a climax. Not a confrontation. But a line drawn. Not in chalk. In bone." Caroline crossed her legs the other way. Her hands found a new position. She smiled. A flicker. A twitch of posture. But it was no longer about her. Camera 3 stayed on the girl. Because the moment was moving toward her. Even if no one else saw it coming. Jasmine had not raised her voice. Had not returned insult for insult. But the center of the stage had shifted, and she hadn't moved an inch to claim it. From behind the booth, Ryden watched. He'd moderated presidential debates. But this wasn't about politics. This was something older. Something that didn't care about sound bites. The girl's hand reached slowly, gently, into her pouch. Her fingers found the folded letter. The room didn't notice her yet. But the pulse had changed. And soon, she would speak, not with volume, with truth. She stood slowly. No noise, no hesitation. As though she had been waiting for this moment for years, not to perform, not to prove, but simply to be. The girl in the white blouse rose from the back row, the letter still folded, still untouched by air. She didn't speak yet. She didn't need to. Her movement was enough. Subtle but seismic. A few heads turned. Ryden saw her first. Not because she was disruptive, she wasn't, but because she didn't move like the others. She moved like someone who had decided, not asked. Someone who knew that voice didn't need volume to be heard. Caroline's gaze shifted toward the ripple. Subtle discomfort flickered across her polished expression. Jasmine remained still, her hands still in her lap. But her breath changed, barely, softly, as if she were anchoring herself to the floor beneath her. The girl stepped forward. She didn't descend to the stage. She didn't approach the mic. She simply walked to the aisle's edge and stopped where the light met the shadow. That perfect boundary between what's seen and what's usually unseen. "I'm not on the speaker list," she said. Her voice clear, quiet, calm. The kind of calm that doesn't ask for permission. The audience froze, not with shock, but with recognition. They knew this wasn't an interruption. This was a reckoning. "I have a letter," she continued. "I wrote it months ago. To Congresswoman Crockett." She paused, unfolded the letter with a practiced tenderness. One fold, then the next. The paper whispered in her hands. "I never sent it. I didn't think it mattered. But now I think, maybe it does." She read, "Dear Congresswoman, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe it will just live in a drawer. Or maybe it'll end up in a pile of 1,000 other notes. But I needed to write it anyway. Because I saw you once, online. You were speaking at a school board meeting. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even long. But you said something I'd never heard before. You said, education doesn't start with knowing the answers. It starts with feeling safe enough to ask." That day, something shifted. I realized I had spent years pretending to know things, not because I did, but because I thought I had to. I was afraid that if I didn't sound smart, I'd be forgotten. Or worse, forgiven for being there at all. The room stayed silent, not out of politeness, but out of gravity. The girl's voice didn't break. It didn't shake. It just carried. I used to lower my voice when I read out loud. I used to avoid eye contact when a teacher asked a question. I used to wait for someone else to say it first, so I'd know how to say it right. But after watching you, I wrote an essay. And I sent it. And I got a scholarship I never thought I would. And I didn't change who I was to do it." She looked up now. Not at the cameras. Not at Ryden. Not even at Caroline. She looked only at Jasmine. "You made me believe I didn't have to leave myself outside to enter the room." No applause. Just breath. The kind of breath people take when something lands too deep to name. Jasmine, still seated, closed her eyes for a moment. Not to hide anything, but to hold it. Caroline shifted in her seat. Her fingers twitched once, as if reaching for a rebuttal. But none came, because this wasn't a point to refute. It was a truth to carry. The girl folded her letter again. One crease, two, then returned to her seat. No drama, no fanfare, just a silence more powerful than any argument that had been made all night. And in that silence, something irreversible happened. The center of the room moved. Not toward power, toward truth. The sun rose quietly over Capitol Hill the next morning, as if trying not to disturb the echo still ringing from the night before. Studio G was empty now, its lights dimmed, chairs reset, floor swept, and cameras covered like sleeping sentinels. But outside those soundproofed walls, something had begun moving. Not in headlines or hashtags, but in people, in quiet conversations, in classroom discussions, in the private places where change begins. The clip of the girl reading her letter, unfiltered, without music or framing, spread first not as a viral sensation, but as a whisper. Teachers saved it, parents bookmarked it, a counselor played it in a session with a student who hadn't spoken in weeks. There was no flashy title, no optimized tags. Just a file name, G12_reads. No one knew her name. She had spoken and left no signature, only impact. And yet, somehow, everyone who watched felt like they had heard from someone they knew, or wished they had. Jasmine Crockett didn't do a follow-up interview. She didn't share the clip. When asked about the moment in an unrelated press conference, she simply said, "It wasn't about me." And for once, the press didn't push. Because everyone understood that when truth lands like that, you don't try to hold it. You just try to let it stay whole. Caroline Levitt continued with her engagements. Panels, podcasts, articles, the same precise vocabulary, the same practiced tone. But there was a new hesitancy, a new distance between her and her audiences. Not out of rejection, but out of reflection. People didn't engage to spar anymore. They listened, but not the same way. One evening, Caroline sat alone in a conference green room, flipping through a small leather notebook. On the last page, she scribbled, "Who taught me to speak?" She stared at the question longer than she intended, then closed the notebook quietly, her reflection flickering on the surface of her untouched tea. In a classroom in Detroit, a student handed her teacher a folded piece of paper before leaving for spring break. "It's not homework," she said. "It's just something I needed to say." Inside was a note that began, "Dear Mr. Hale, I still remember the day you said my accent wasn't a mistake." In a community college in Fresno, a professor taped a quote to her door. It read, "You don't have to sound like the room to belong in it." Students paused as they walked by, reading it once, twice, then taking out their phones to snap a photo. At a bookstore in Ohio, someone created a display called Letters We Never Sent. People began leaving their own. Some were short, "To my bus driver." Others long, "To the teacher who asked me if I was okay, not just if I was prepared." Within weeks, the wall filled. And somewhere in a small apartment, the girl in the white blouse sat at her desk with the pouch beside her. The paper still folded inside. She didn't take it out often. She didn't need to. She had spoken, and in doing so, she had done what most people never dared to try. She had changed the air in the room. One evening, she opened her email and found a message from a teacher in Minnesota. Subject: "Thank you, even if I don't know your name." It read, "My students wrote letters today because of you. One of them wrote to her older self. Another to her mother. I wrote one to myself. Thank you." She smiled, not because it felt like attention, but because it felt like connection. A real one. The kind you can't plan, can't manufacture, can't rehearse. She replied only once. Keep asking the questions that make people pause. That's where change begins. And she closed the email. Then closed her eyes. And breathed. The story didn't end with applause or a viral metric. It ended with understanding. And that made it a beginning.